Hey, what's up, VC? It's Steve again, Harmless Rebel, and it's time for another hard rock and heavy metal update. Let's just kind of jump into this. This will actually probably be my last update for probably a week and a half to 2 weeks. I actually have a contest response I'm going to do in just a minute, but other than that, I'm going on vacation, leaving tomorrow afternoon, and I won't be back for at least a week, or for a week and a half. And it'll probably be a few days after that before I think about doing an update or anything. So I will have my computer with me. I'll probably still be commenting on other videos and stuff like that. But other than that, you won't see much of me. So, which for some of you may not be a bad thing. Let's kind of jump into it though. A lot of hard rock in this one. There are some definitely some heavy metal classics in here, but a lot of this is just hard rock that's been sitting in my inbox that I'm finally getting around to listening to. First up, an absolute classic that just doesn't get enough credit. Fly to the Rainbow from the Scorpions. This is their second album. I really love this album. A lot of people look at their later stuff and consider that kind of their prime. I really like their first four albums. They're probably my favorites. I do like all their stuff going in through the mid-'80s, but this is just some of their standout material that, like I said, just doesn't get enough credit. And then going into their 80s stuff, finally picked up a copy of Animal Magnetism. I actually thought that I already had a copy of this. And didn't, so I ran back to the store and grabbed it because it was relatively cheap, maybe $3 or $4. Of course, the American cover, which it makes no sense to me why this was ever censored in the U.S., but whatever. I guess it's just to prove that we are out here. Next up, I bought these four together and couldn't be happier. Definitely a favorite of mine from the late 70s and early 80s. I don't think they get enough attention in the VC. There's a couple members that bring them up pretty regularly, but not enough in my opinion. And that's Thin Lizzy. First up is Renegade, and I was blown away, man. These things are all four near mint to mint condition. I mean, just beautiful. And I picked them all up for cheap. But first up is Renegade. I think this one gets a bad rap. A lot of people don't like this one, and I don't understand it. I think this is a really kick-ass album. It may not be as good as you know, Black Rose or Jailbreak, but still just an amazing album beginning to end, in my opinion. And this one is a promo copy. Next up is Chinatown. This one I get people's complaints. I think the band... This is not the band at their best. This is probably my least favorite of the Thin Lizzy albums. However, it's got one of my all-time favorite album covers. Love this album cover. Still a good album. You know, I mean, it's better than half the stuff that was coming out at that time. But just when you compare it to the other Thin Lizzy albums, it just doesn't hold its own weight. And then, of course, next up are my two favorite, Black Rose, which is also a promo copy, and then you know, probably their best is Jailbreak. Another one that I love this album cover. So this one's kind of cool. This one's not marked as a promo in any way. However, it comes with the band's media pack, which is really cool. It's got this really nice high gloss photo. You got the band photo behind it. History and booking information for Thin Lizzy. And then a little biography of each of the members. So this is very cool. I've never actually seen one of these before for Thin Lizzy, so I was really stoked to run across that. And then the album itself is just in mint condition, you know. I paid a couple extra bucks for this one, but completely worth it in my opinion, especially with that promo packet inside. I thought that was really cool. Next up, man, this is an absolute 70s classic. I actually spun this a couple times last night. I love this band, especially their first 3 albums. This is the first album from Blood Rock. Just, like I said, killer from beginning to end. I really want to explore the rest of their discography. I've only heard their first 3. I've got 1 and 3 so far. But highly, highly recommend checking them out if you're into the 70s hard rock. And then another just absolute classic is Live in the Heart of the City from Whitesnake. Now this is the single LP edition of this. I don't know why they released 2 editions. You've got the single LP here, and there's a double LP version with a gatefold that actually has extra songs on it. And they were released at the same time from what I understand. So I'm not sure why Mirage did that, but they did. But this is, like I said, this is the single album version. I only paid $3 or $4 for it. Not in the best condition. You can see kind of rough. It's VG, but still plays really nice, and it's still just an absolute classic. Next up, Kiss Alive 2, the 2014 repress. This is one I wasn't planning on buying. I've got 2 copies of Kiss Alive. I believe I've got a first pressing, I know for sure, and I believe I have a 3rd pressing as well. And they're both in phenomenal condition. But I ran across this for 13 or 14 bucks in mint condition, so I wasn't going to pass up on it, you know. So had to grab it. Next up, this is a really cool album. Highly recommended if you run across it. This is ACDC Soul Steppers. This is live in Melbourne on New Year's Eve 1974. This is a killer live set. Just a really well done bootleg. It's a soundboard recording, and it definitely sounds like it. The quality's definitely there, and it's got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 from that show, and then there's also a couple songs from a radio broadcast. So they have TNT, and then Dirty Deeds. From a radio broadcast from January of 1975, so it really sounds nice though. Like I said, if you run across it, I've seen this. I saw this at one other store that wanted like $50 for it. I picked this up for $15. It's worth $15. I don't really think any bootleg is worth $60. That's just my opinion, but it's on this kind of cool gray marble vinyl. But for all you ACDC fans, especially Bon Scott fans, again, I highly recommend picking this one up. It sounds great. Next up, we've got the first album from Great White. This one comes on 3 or 4 different album covers. I've seen it, this one embossed. I've seen it not embossed with all 4 in white. And then I've seen, I think it's this as the album cover. A bunch of variations of this, but this is my favorite of the Great White albums. Black and Blue, Nasty Nasty, promo copy. I wasn't expecting much from this album. I like their first couple of albums. You know, this is getting later on. This was 89? Oh, this was 86. I don't know, I was just expecting more of an AOR sound, and it's really good hard rock. I really dug this. Like I said, a lot more than I expected to. So, these next 2 are both upgrades. I picked both of these up for, I think, $5 a piece. And they're both, the albums themselves are near mint, and the sleeves are VG to VG+. But, Who Do We Think We Are from Deep Purple. Absolute classic. This one doesn't get mentioned enough when mentioned in Deep Purple. I mean, everything they put out in the 60s and 70s, I love. A lot of people don't like their first album. I like their first album. And then Deep Purple and Rock. This one's got a little bit of ring wear. But both of these are first U.S. pressings. Both of them, like I said, the vinyl's in absolute perfect condition. And I picked them up for $5 a piece. Like I said, I have copies of both of those that are a little bit rougher, so those are really nice upgrades. Also picked up a nice copy of Black Sabbath, Born Again. This has been one of the hardest Black Sabbaths for me to find, believe it or not. You know, I see them online all the time, but this is the first time I've seen it in the wild since probably the 80s or early 90s. But this was another album that gets a bad rap. Speaking of Deep Purple, it's got Ian Gillan on vocals here. I could live without Bill Ward on drums. He's still not my favorite drummer, but you know, Geezer and Tony, it's a killer album. It's very underrated in my opinion. And it's got Ian Gillan. Next up, Heaven. This is Bent. This is a killer hard rock album. I really like this album. Sadly, actually, I bought this, and then literally 3 or 4 hours later, I got the email from one of the magazines that sends email updates that the lead singer had died, which I thought was really odd. You know, I buy the album, and a couple hours later, the vocalist died. Alan Fryer was the vocalist. But really good album. This is my second Heaven album. Both of them are recommended. This one actually surprised me. This is Earthshaker from Y&T. I am a fan of Y&T. I wasn't feeling this album. I'll give it another spin just to listen again. I don't know what it was though. It's funny. I actually thought this was a later album because the sound wasn't as good as the other Y&T albums I have, and it turns out this is their second or third album, or their third album, I think. So this is one of their earlier albums, and usually the earlier stuff's what I like the most. But regardless, nice gold stamp promo, really nice condition. Like I said, I'll give it another spin. Maybe it's not just me. You know, those of you that have heard Earthshaker, let me know in the notes what you thought of it. Maybe I'm missing something. Next up, actually, we'll bring up what we're listening to right now, Diary of a Madman. This is a replacement. I traded my Diary of a Madman as part of a big trade. I traded SMF Captain Howdy like 15 albums for a very hard to find Kiss Originals 2 in really nice condition. And like I said, I had traded my 20th anniversary copy of this, and I actually ran across a really nice original pressing, which is obviously what we're listening to right now. And then that same day, I ran across a really nice near mint copy of Bark at the Moon, which is probably my least favorite Ozzy album, with the exception of his last 2 or 3 albums, which I think are just absolute garbage. But actually, his last album I haven't even listened to, and no desire to. I mean, 1983, obviously, this is right after the death of Randy Rhoads, and the quality, the songwriting wasn't there. I mean, you would think with Bob Daisley on bass and Jakey Lee on guitars, this would have been an amazing album. It just wasn't there for me. I mean, Bark at the Moon is obviously a classic. Rock and Roll Rebel, So Tired are good songs, but just as a whole, it doesn't compare to anything else that he put out in the 80s or early 90s. Next up, Hard Rockers, Stone Fury. This is Burns Like a Star. This is one that one of the local shops has had for a while. I finally got around to grabbing it. I think I paid $4 or $5 for it in near mint condition. So some really good tracks on here. Worth checking out if you find it for a good price. I wouldn't spend more than $5 or $6 for it, but a really good hard rock album for that price. And then 2 that were missing from my Saxon collection. I picked up Strong Arm of the Law. And then also Crusader. And this one is a French copy, if I remember correctly. But great album. Next up, you know, I went back and forth on this one. This one's been in the record store for 2 or 3 months, and I finally grabbed it. They've got one of the most amazing guitarists. I would love to have heard what he did with a heavier band, but I'm talking about Nuno Betancourt and Extreme. And this one is European Union pressing. It's really weird. All of these are the same. They were only pressed in Europe, but some of them are marked UK, some are marked Netherlands, some are marked Germany. And then this one is kind of like the rare one for some reason. There's no country given. It just says European Union. But still, found it's near mint condition. You know, you don't run across them that often. At least here in the U.S. you don't. I've never seen another copy. This is not my... I would prefer the first two Extreme albums over three. But still definitely worth picking up. Next up... End of... next up we got Pat Travers, Making Magic. This album was awesome. This is the first Pat Travers that I've heard that wasn't Pat Travers' band. And with this album cover, I really wasn't expecting much, but I was really blown away with how good this is. And it shouldn't surprise me. I mean, Pat Travers is Pat Travers. The guy's amazing. But killer album. Highly recommend it. Next up, just another absolute classic that everybody should have in their collection. Phenomenon from UFO. Just Phil Moog and Michael Schenker at their best. I love this album. It's not my favorite UFO album, but it's definitely in the top three. And now it's time for the heavy stuff. This one I was really, really impressed by. I bought it because of the members. I had never heard it. I don't even remember hearing about this coming out. And that really surprises me because I'm a huge fan of both of the primary band member, the bands of the two primary members. This is Kingdom of Sorrow. This is a killer album. Definitely has that sludge doom feel that you get from what's his name? Kirk Weinstein. Kirk Weinstein from Crowbar. This is him and Jamie Josta together. It's also got the guitarist is Barry Gibb's son. I can't think of his name, but he also played with Crowbar for a while. But Jamie Josta of Hatebreed and Kirk Weinstein of Crowbar. Killer album. Highly recommend this. They have a second album. I'm going to be on the lookout for that one. Let's see. And this one is on blue vinyl. And they say this one was a limited press, but I'm not really buying it. They pressed it in like 5 different colors, and each one says that they released 500 of those colors, which would come to 2,500 albums. But the back of all the albums say limited edition of 2,000, so I don't know what the deal is with that. I don't know if there's some misinformation somewhere or what, but regardless, I highly recommend checking out this band if you haven't listened to them, especially if you're a fan of Hatebreed or Crowbar, and I'm a huge fan of both of them. So, next up, this is one that Scott turned me on to. I had never heard of this band before. This is an amazing album, though. A little bit raw, but it doesn't matter. It's still great. I will say my copy of this album is not the best. It came sealed. There were a bunch of micro scratches on it. There's a bunch of pops, probably 6 or 7 different pops. It's just a bad pressing. And unfortunately, I ordered it from Greece, and where I ordered it from, there are no more copies. So, you know, it is what it is. But this is Heathen's Rage, Fight Till the End, The Lost Sessions. If you find a nice copy of it, I do recommend it. It's a great album. Even with the pops, I'll listen to it again. You know, that sucks, but it is what it is. You know, I mean, that's unfortunately the sad thing about pressings of today. Usually the European pressings aren't as bad as a lot of the stuff that's coming out of the U.S. plants, but this was just one of those that didn't work out well for me. So, again, Heathen's Rage. I highly recommend it, though. And then last but not least, an absolute thrash classic. This is probably in my top 20 all-time favorite albums. It's Beneath the Remains from Sepultura. This is an original pressing on RC Records. I love, love, love this album. Everything about it, beginning to end. And this is one, unlike Schizophrenia, which I didn't like the first time I heard it because it was so raw. I loved the rawness of this from the beginning. And it's actually funny, you know, I still see this getting listed as death metal, which blows me away because, I mean, this is straight up thrash. And some of my, like I said, it's one of my all-time favorite albums. It's one of my favorite thrash albums. But I still see lists of like top 10, top 20 death metal albums of all time. And this one pops up on it all the time. I don't get it, you know. And I've seen article after article of Max just yelling up and down that it's not death metal. But regardless, an amazing album. The last time I saw Sepultura was second to last tour they did before Max left the band. They did like 3 songs off of this, and just an absolute classic. I did pay a couple bucks for this one. I've been looking for it for a long time. This one's in near mint condition, and I just couldn't pass up on it. But worth every dollar in my opinion. If you haven't heard that album, get out there and buy it.